My name is Jessica Martinez, and I thought family meant everything. I was wrong. 3 months ago, I nearly died from an allergic reaction that sent me into anaphylactic shock. While I was fighting for my life in the ICU, my parents were at my sister's birthday party, posting Instagram stories and cutting cake. When I woke up 5 days later, alone, I discovered they had done something far worse than just abandon me. They had been stealing my insurance money for years, and now they wanted me to pay an $89,000 medical bill myself. But what they didn't know was that I had been building something they never saw coming, and I was about to use it to expose everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The headache started on a Thursday morning while I was editing wedding photos in my downtown Austin loft. I'd been dealing with chronic migraines for months, the kind that made my vision blur and my stomach turn inside out. Dr. Peterson had finally prescribed something stronger, a new medication that was supposed to change everything. I remember feeling hopeful as I swallowed that first pill, thinking maybe I could finally get back to the photography business I'd been building on the side. My main job was graphic design for a marketing firm, but photography was my passion. Every weekend I shot weddings, engagement sessions, family portraits. The money was good, better than my parents knew. I'd been quietly building a business account, saving every penny, because I'd learned early that independence was the only security I could count on in the Martinez family. Growing up as the older daughter meant being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who fixed problems instead of creating them. Ashley, my younger sister, had always been the star. At 25, she still lived at home, still got a monthly allowance from our parents, still had her car payments and health insurance covered while she pursued her dream of becoming a social media influencer. She had 60,000 followers on Instagram, most of them bought, and spent her days creating content about her perfect life in our parents' perfect house in Cedar Park. I loved her anyway. That was my mistake. The allergic reaction hit me 20 minutes after taking the second dose of the medication. It started as a tingling sensation in my throat, then my tongue began to swell. I tried to call out, but my voice came out as a whisper. My hands shook as I reached for my phone to dial 911, but the room started spinning before I could finish the call. The last thing I remember clearly was falling off my desk chair, my laptop crashing to the floor beside me, wedding photos scattered, like confetti around my head. The paramedics found me because my downstairs neighbor, Mrs. Chen, heard the crash and came to check. She later told me my lips were blue and my breathing was so shallow she thought I was dead. They rushed me to St. David's Medical Center, sirens wailing through the Austin traffic, but I wasn't conscious for any of it. The anaphylactic shock had sent my body into complete system failure. What happened next is something I had to piece together later, through medical records and witness statements and the devastating trail of evidence that would eventually save my life. While I was being intubated in the emergency room, while doctors were pumping my body full of epinephrine and steroids, while my heart rate was spiking and dropping in dangerous patterns, my parents were at home planning the perfect party for Ashley's 25th birthday. The party had been in the works for months. $15,000 at a lakeside venue on Lake Travis with a live DJ, professional photographer, and catered dinner for 150 guests. Ashley had been posting countdown stories on Instagram for weeks, showing off her custom dress, the elaborate decorations, the multi-tiered cake that cost more than most people's monthly rent. It was going to be her breakthrough moment, the party that would launch her influencer career into the stratosphere. Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, the emergency physician who treated me, called my parents at 7:30 that Friday evening. I know the exact time because it's documented in my medical file, along with her notes about the conversation. She told them I was in critical condition, that the next 24 hours would determine whether I suffered permanent brain damage from oxygen deprivation. She asked them to come to the hospital immediately. My mother's response was burned into Dr. Rodriguez's memory. "We'll be there as soon as we can," Linda Martinez said. "But tomorrow is Ashley's birthday party. We've been planning this for months. Can you just keep Jessica stable until Sunday?" Dr. Rodriguez told me later that she had to put the phone down and take a moment to process what she'd heard. In 15 years of emergency medicine, she'd never had a parent ask her to keep their child alive until it was convenient for them to visit. They never came that night. While I spent Friday night unconscious on a ventilator, my parents were at home, confirming catering details and checking the weather forecast for Saturday's outdoor celebration. My phone, which had been damaged in the fall, wasn't receiving their calls anyway. Not that they tried very hard to reach me. The hospital called them 6 more times over the weekend. Sometimes they answered, sometimes they didn't. When they did pick up, they always had the same response. They would visit after the party. Saturday morning brought complications. My body wasn't responding to treatment the way doctors expected. My blood pressure kept dropping, and they had to increase the medication keeping me sedated. Dr. Rodriguez made another call to my parents at 9 a.m., explaining that my condition had worsened overnight. This time, my father answered. "Look, we understand Jessica is sick," Bob Martinez told her. "But Ashley has been looking forward to this party for months. Half the family is flying in from San Antonio and Houston. We can't just cancel everything." Jessica would understand. She's always been reasonable about these things. What my father didn't mention was that he'd already paid for everything in advance, and the deposits were non-refundable. What he also didn't mention was that canceling the party would mean disappointing Ashley. And disappointing Ashley was something my parents had spent 25 years carefully avoiding. The party went on as planned. At 6 p.m. on Saturday, while I was still unconscious in the ICU, Ashley made her grand entrance at the Lake Travis venue in a custom white dress that cost $3,000. The professional photographer they'd hired captured every moment. Ashley blowing out candles, Ashley dancing with our cousins, Ashley posing with her elaborate flower arrangements while the sunset painted the lake golden behind her. But the most devastating part was the Instagram stories. Throughout the evening, Ashley posted dozens of videos showing the party in real time. Her followers watched her laugh and dance and give a tearful speech about how grateful she was for her amazing family. She tagged our parents in every post, showing them beaming with pride as they watched their perfect daughter celebrate her perfect life. Marcus Thompson was my night nurse that Saturday evening. He'd been working in the ICU for 3 years, and he'd seen families handle crisis in all kinds of ways. Some fell apart, some got angry, some clung to each other for support. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But he'd never seen a family simply not show up. He kept checking the visitor log, expecting to see the Martinez family name appear. It never did. Around 10 p.m., Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He pulled out his phone and started documenting what he was seeing. Not my medical condition, which would have violated privacy laws, but the empty chair beside my bed. The absence of flowers, cards, or personal items. The way other patients' rooms filled with worried family members, while mine stayed eerily quiet. He also screenshot Ashley's Instagram stories. Later, when investigators asked him why, he said something about the whole situation felt wrong. A gut instinct that this wasn't just a family dealing with crisis in their own way, but something more deliberate, more calculated. Sunday morning, I started showing signs of improvement. My oxygen levels stabilized, and Dr. Rodriguez made the decision to reduce the sedation and see if I could breathe on my own. The process of waking up from a medically induced coma is nothing like the movies. It's not a gentle flutter of eyelashes followed by perfect clarity. It's confusion, disorientation, and a throat so raw from the breathing tube that speaking feels like swallowing glass. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the quiet that comes from being alone, but the specific silence that comes from being forgotten. The chair next to my bed wasn't just empty, it was pristine. No one had sat in it, leaned on it, or left any trace of human presence. The small table beside it held only hospital-issued water and tissues. Nothing personal. Nothing that suggested anyone who loved me had spent time in this space. Marcus was checking my IV when I finally managed to croak out a question. "Where is my family?" He paused, his hand still on the IV line, and I saw something flicker across his face. Pity, maybe, or anger. "They said they'd be here soon," he replied carefully. "How are you feeling? Any pain or difficulty breathing?" But I could tell he was deflecting, and the way he avoided my eyes made my chest tighten with something worse than physical pain. I tried to sit up, but my body felt like it belonged to someone else, weak and unresponsive. "Can you call them? For me?" "My phone." I gestured weakly toward the bedside table, but there was nothing there except medical equipment. "Your phone was damaged," Marcus explained gently. "But don't worry about that right now. You need to focus on recovering. The doctor will want to run some tests now that you're awake." The tests took most of Sunday afternoon. Blood work, cognitive assessments, breathing exercises. Dr. Rodriguez explained that I'd been unconscious for nearly 3 days, that my body had shut down completely in response to the allergic reaction. She was optimistic about my recovery, but wanted to keep me for observation for at least another day or two. "Have you been able to reach my parents?" I asked her during one of her visits. Dr. Rodriguez sat down in the chair next to my bed, the same chair that had remained empty since Friday night. "We've been in touch with them," she said carefully. "They know you're improving. I'm sure they'll be here soon." But something in her tone suggested she wasn't sure at all. Later, I would learn that she had called them that morning to report my improvement, and my mother's first question wasn't about my condition or when I could come home. It was about whether the hospital would be billing insurance directly or if they would need to pay up front. Sunday evening brought a different nurse, an older woman named Patricia, who had been working in the ICU for 20 years. She was less diplomatic than Marcus, more willing to speak plainly about what she was seeing. When I asked about my family for the 4th time that day, she sat down and looked me directly in the eyes. "Honey," she said, "I don't know what's going on with your people, but this isn't normal. In 20 years, I've never seen a family not show up when their child is in the ICU. Not once." Her words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been holding onto the hope that there was some explanation, some reason why they hadn't come. Maybe they were afraid of hospitals, or dealing with their own crisis, or simply waiting for me to be more awake before visiting. But Patricia's blunt assessment forced me to confront what I'd been trying to avoid. They had chosen not to come. That night, alone in the ICU, I started thinking about Ashley's birthday party. I couldn't remember the exact date, but I knew it was sometime around now. Had they chosen the party over visiting me? Was I lying here unconscious while they celebrated? The thought seemed too cruel to be real, but it lodged in my mind like a splinter. Monday morning brought unexpected visitors, but not the ones I was hoping for. 2 women in business suits appeared at my bedside, introducing themselves as representatives from the hospital's billing department. They were polite but direct. I had generated $89,000 in medical expenses over the weekend, and they needed to discuss payment arrangements. "I'm on my parents' insurance," I told them, still groggy from pain medication. "Bob and Linda Martinez. I can give you their information." The women exchanged glances. "We've already spoken with them," one of them said. "They're claiming you're not covered under their policy. They said you're an independent adult and responsible for your own medical expenses." The words didn't make sense. I'd been on their family plan since college, even after I moved out and started working. It was one of the ways they helped me financially while I was building my career. Or so I thought. "There must be some mistake," I insisted. I can call them and clear this up. But when the billing representatives left, promising to return the next day for a payment plan discussion, I was left with a growing sense of dread. Something was fundamentally wrong with this situation, something beyond a simple insurance mix-up or family miscommunication. Marcus returned for his Monday evening shift, and I could tell immediately that something had changed in his demeanor. He was more focused, more purposeful in his movements around my room. After he finished checking my vitals, he lingered by my bedside longer than necessary. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said, keeping his voice low. "What's your relationship like with your family? I mean, generally speaking." The question caught me off guard. "Why do you ask?" He hesitated, then pulled out his phone. "I hope you don't mind, but I've been documenting some things over the weekend. Things that seemed unusual." He showed me screenshots of Instagram stories, and my heart stopped. Ashley, radiant in white, blowing out candles. My parents, beaming with pride, raising champagne glasses. Timestamps showing Saturday night. The same Saturday night I was fighting for my life. "This is your sister?" Marcus asked gently. I nodded, unable to speak. "The party was Saturday night, while you were unconscious." The room seemed to tilt around me. They hadn't just chosen not to visit me in the hospital. They had actively chosen to celebrate instead. While I was on a ventilator, they were toasting Ashley's future. While doctors were calling with updates about my condition, they were taking family photos that would get hundreds of likes on social media. "There's more," Marcus said quietly. "I probably shouldn't be showing you this, but I think you need to know." He pulled up another screenshot, this one showing a group text message thread. I could see Ashley's name and my mother's number, and part of a message that made my blood run cold. "Let's not let Jessica's drama ruin your special day." I closed my eyes, trying to process what I was seeing. My near-death experience had been classified as drama. My allergic reaction, my 3 days in a coma, my struggle to breathe, all of it reduced to an inconvenience that might interfere with Ashley's birthday celebration. "Why are you showing me this?" I whispered. Marcus sat down in the chair that my family had never occupied. "Because I've seen this before," he said. "Not exactly this, but patterns like it. Families who treat one child like they're disposable, while treating another like they're precious. It's a form of abuse, even if they don't call it that." The word abuse hit me like a slap. I'd never thought of my family dynamics in those terms. Yes, Ashley was the favorite, and yes, I was expected to be the responsible one, but abuse seemed too strong a word for what I'd always assumed was just typical family favoritism. "I think you need to be very careful," Marcus continued, "about what you sign, what you agree to, who you trust. Because if they can leave you here for 3 days without visiting, if they can party while you're unconscious, then they're capable of other things too." His words would prove more prophetic than either of us realized at the time. As I lay in that hospital bed Monday night, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of everything I'd learned, I had no idea that the insurance issue wasn't a mistake or miscommunication. I didn't know that my parents had been systematically stealing money that belonged to me for years. I didn't realize that this medical crisis wasn't the beginning of their betrayal, but simply the moment when they stopped bothering to hide it. All I knew was that something fundamental had shifted in my understanding of my family and my place in it. The people I'd trusted most in the world had looked at my suffering and decided it was less important than Ashley's Instagram content. They had literally chosen her birthday party over my survival. But I was alive, and I was awake, and I was starting to get angry. That anger would be the fuel that carried me through everything that came next. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that only comes after a sleepless night spent staring at uncomfortable truths. The hospital breakfast tray sat untouched, beside my bed while I replayed Marcus's words over and over in my mind. The Instagram screenshots felt like looking at evidence from a crime scene, except the crime was against me, and the perpetrators were my own family. Dr. Rodriguez came by during her morning rounds, and I could see the concern in her eyes as she reviewed my chart. My physical recovery was progressing well, but something in my demeanor must have telegraphed the emotional turmoil brewing inside me. "How are you feeling today, Jessica?" she asked, settling into the chair that had become a symbol of my family's absence. "Confused," I admitted, "about a lot of things. Can you tell me exactly when my parents were called and what they said?" Dr. Rodriguez hesitated, clearly weighing patient confidentiality against what she seemed to recognize as a deeper problem. "I can share some general information," she said carefully. "We called your emergency contacts multiple times over the weekend. The responses we received were unusual." She pulled out a small notebook from her coat pocket and flipped through several pages. "Friday at 7:30 p.m., initial call regarding your condition. Saturday morning at 9 a.m., update call about complications. Saturday evening at 6 p.m., another update. Sunday morning at 10 a.m., improvement notification." She looked up at me. The general response was that they would visit when it was convenient. The clinical way she described it somehow made it worse. Convenient. As if my life-threatening medical emergency was an appointment that could be rescheduled around their social calendar. "What exactly did they say about insurance?" I pressed. Dr. Rodriguez closed her notebook. "They claimed you weren't covered under their family plan and that you were responsible for your own medical expenses. But Jessica, insurance verification is something we do routinely. There are some inconsistencies we're looking into." Before I could ask what kind of inconsistencies, my phone buzzed on the bedside table. Marcus had managed to get it working again, though the screen was cracked from my fall. The text message was from my mother. "Heard you're feeling better. We'll try to visit today if we can. Hope you understand we had family obligations this weekend." Family obligations. That's how she characterized Ashley's birthday party. Not as a choice they made, but as an obligation that took precedence over their other daughter's survival. I showed the message to Dr. Rodriguez, and I watched her jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "Jessica, I want you to know that what happened here this weekend isn't normal family behavior during a medical crisis. I've been practicing emergency medicine for 15 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this." Her words validated what I was beginning to understand but hadn't wanted to acknowledge. This wasn't just family dysfunction or poor communication. This was something more deliberate, more calculated. The billing representatives returned that afternoon, this time with additional paperwork and a more serious tone. The woman who had spoken to me the day before, who introduced herself as Margaret from Patient Financial Services, spread several documents across the rolling table that stretched over my hospital bed. "We've done some additional research into your insurance situation," she began, "and we've discovered some irregularities that we need to discuss with you." She pulled out a printout that looked like an insurance benefits summary. "According to our records, you have been listed as a dependent on your parents' policy for the past 6 years. However, when we attempted to process your claims, we were told by the policyholder that you were no longer covered." My stomach dropped. What does that mean exactly? Margaret exchanged glances with her colleague before continuing. "It means that someone with authority over the policy has been accepting insurance reimbursements in your name while simultaneously claiming you're not entitled to coverage. We've found over $40,000 in payments made for medical services under your name in the past 3 years." The room started spinning. $40,000 in medical reimbursements that should have gone to paying for my care, but instead had been diverted somewhere else. Where did the money go? That's what we're trying to determine. The checks were all endorsed and deposited, but not into accounts associated with the medical providers who treated you. We've contacted our fraud investigation department, and they'll likely want to speak with you once you're discharged. After the billing representatives left, I sat in stunned silence trying to process what I'd learned. My parents hadn't just abandoned me during a medical crisis. They had been systematically stealing money from my medical care for years. Every doctor's visit, every prescription, every medical test I'd needed had generated insurance reimbursements that they had apparently been pocketing while telling me I was covered under their family plan. The pieces started fitting together in a way that made me physically nauseous. My chronic migraines, the ones that had been getting worse over the past year, the ones that led to the medication that nearly killed me. I'd been seeing specialists, trying different treatments, accumulating medical expenses that I thought were covered by insurance. But if my parents had been stealing the reimbursements, then the medical providers hadn't been getting paid, which meant they had been writing off my care as charity or bad debt. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through old text messages, looking for any mention of medical expenses or insurance issues. What I found made my hands shake. Multiple messages from my mother over the past 2 years. Things like, "Don't worry about the doctor bills. We'll handle it through insurance." And, "Just focus on getting better. We've got the financial stuff covered." They had been managing my medical expenses all right, managing them right into their own bank accounts. My phone rang, startling me, out of my research. It was Ashley. "Jess? Oh my God, I just heard about your allergic reaction thing. Are you okay?" Her voice had that particular tone she used when she was performing concern rather than feeling it, the same voice she used in her Instagram stories when she talked about social causes she wanted to seem passionate about. "I'm alive," I said, flatly. "Well, that's good. I'm so sorry we couldn't visit you right away, but you know how crazy this weekend was with my party and everything. It was absolutely amazing, by the way. The photographer got some incredible shots, and my dress looked perfect in every single picture. I'll have to show you when you get out." She talked for 10 minutes about her birthday party, the decorations, the food, the compliments she received, how many new followers she'd gained from posting about it. Not once did she ask about my medical condition, my treatment, or how I was feeling. When she finally paused for breath, I jumped in. "Ashley, were you aware that I was in a coma while your party was happening?" There was a brief silence, then a nervous laugh. "I mean, Mom said you were sleeping a lot, but you know how dramatic you can be about being sick. Plus, we couldn't just cancel everything. Do you know how much work went into planning that party?" Dramatic. The same word my mother had used in the group text Marcus had shown me. I was beginning to see how my family had reframed my near-death experience to justify their choices. In their narrative, I wasn't fighting for my life. I was being dramatic about feeling sick. I wasn't in a medically induced coma. I was sleeping a lot. My anaphylactic shock wasn't a life-threatening emergency. It was an inconvenience that threatened to interfere with Ashley's special day. "I have to go," I told her, ending the call before she could launch into another description of her party highlights. The rest of Tuesday passed in a blur of medical tests, insurance phone calls, and increasingly disturbing discoveries about my family's financial behavior. The hospital's social worker, a kind woman named Carmen Rodriguez, visited in the late afternoon to discuss discharge planning and support services. "I understand you're dealing with some family issues in addition to your medical recovery," she said gently. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay when you're discharged? Someone who can help you during your recovery period?" The question hit harder than I expected. I realized I didn't know the answer. My apartment was safe, but I lived alone, and I was still weak from the medical trauma. Under normal circumstances, I would have expected to recover at my parents' house, with my mother fussing over me and my father making sure I had everything I needed. But these weren't normal circumstances, and my parents had made it clear that I wasn't their priority. "I have friends," I said, though I wasn't sure how much I wanted to burden anyone with the complexity of what I was dealing with. Carmen nodded, but I could tell she sensed there was more to the story. "I'm going to give you some resources," she said, pulling out a folder. Information about medical financial assistance programs, patient advocacy services, and legal aid organizations that specialize in insurance fraud cases. Just in case you need them. Insurance fraud. The word sounded so official, so criminal. But that's what this was, wasn't it? My parents had been committing insurance fraud, using my name and medical information to steal money that should have gone to paying for my health care. That evening, Marcus returned for his night shift, and I could tell immediately that he had news. He checked my vitals quickly, then pulled the privacy curtain around my bed and sat down in his usual chair. "I've been doing some research," he said quietly, "about your family situation. I hope you don't mind, but something about this whole thing has been bothering me since Friday night." He pulled out his phone and showed me a series of screenshots. These are public records from Travis County: property ownership, tax filings, business registrations. Your parents own 3 properties in Austin, including the house in Cedar Park where your sister lives. Your father's insurance business has been doing very well based on the tax records I could access. I stared at the documents on his phone screen. 3 properties. I'd known about the family house, but not about the other 2. What are the other properties? One is a duplex in South Austin that they rent out. The other is a small office building downtown. Based on the property values and rental income, your parents are worth significantly more than most people realize. The implications hit me like a physical blow. They weren't struggling financially. They weren't unable to help with my medical expenses because money was tight. They were wealthy, or at least well off, and they were choosing to let me shoulder the burden of an $89,000 medical bill while they collected money that was meant to pay for my care. "There's something else," Marcus continued. "I found records of a business your father registered last year, Martinez Medical Consulting. The description says it provides insurance navigation services for families dealing with complex medical situations. My father was running a business helping other families navigate medical insurance issues while simultaneously defrauding the insurance system that was supposed to cover his own daughter. The hypocrisy was staggering. "Why are you helping me?" I asked Marcus. "This isn't part of your job." He was quiet for a moment, staring at his hands. "My aunt went through something similar when I was in college. Different circumstances, but the same kind of family financial abuse. By the time anyone realized what was happening, she'd lost her house, her savings, everything. The people who were supposed to protect her were the ones who destroyed her life." He looked up at me with an intensity that made me sit up straighter. "The difference is, you're finding out now, while you still have time to do something about it." My aunt never got that chance. Wednesday morning brought unexpected visitors. My parents finally arrived, not together but separately, and not with flowers or concern, but with paperwork. My mother appeared first, just after breakfast, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the kind of outfit she wore to important real estate closings. "Jessica, honey, you look so much better," she said, though her eyes were already scanning the room, taking inventory of the medical equipment and the stack of papers on my bedside table. "We're so sorry we couldn't get here sooner, but Ashley's party was such a production, and you know how these big family events can be." She sat down in the chair and immediately pulled out a tablet, scrolling through what looked like insurance forms. "We need to get this medical situation sorted out as quickly as possible. The hospital has been calling us nonstop about payment arrangements. And frankly, it's becoming quite stressful for the whole family. Stressful for the whole family. Not stressful for me, the person who had nearly died and was now facing financial ruin. Stressful for them, because they were being asked to take responsibility for the insurance fraud they had been committing. Mom, the hospital told me that insurance reimbursements in my name have been going to the wrong place. Can you explain that?" Linda Martinez's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the momentary flash of panic that crossed her face. "Oh, that's just some administrative confusion. You know how complicated insurance can be. Your father handles all of that, and I'm sure it's just a matter of updating some paperwork. She pulled out several forms from her portfolio. Actually, that's why I'm here. We need you to sign some documents to straighten everything out. Nothing major, just some updates to your beneficiary information and medical power of attorney forms. I stared at the papers she was spreading across my bedside table. Medical power of attorney, financial beneficiary updates, forms that would give my parents legal control over my medical decisions and financial arrangements, forms that would make it even easier for them to manage my money and my medical care without my input or oversight. I don't think I should sign anything right now, I said carefully. I'm still recovering and I don't fully understand what these forms are for. My mother's smile became strained. Jessica, you're being unnecessarily difficult about this. We're trying to help you, but we can't do that if you won't cooperate. The hospital needs these forms to process your insurance claims properly. But I remembered what the billing representatives had told me about the irregularities in my insurance processing. The hospital didn't need these forms to handle my care. My parents needed these forms to continue handling my money. I'd like to have a lawyer review these before I sign anything, I said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My mother's voice became clipped and formal. A lawyer? Jessica, we're your family. We're trying to help you navigate a complicated situation, and you're talking about involving lawyers? That seems a bit extreme, don't you think? She started gathering the papers back into her portfolio, her movements sharp and efficient. Perhaps you need more time to recover before making important decisions. Your judgment might still be affected by the medications you've been taking. There it was again. The suggestion that I wasn't thinking clearly, that my concerns weren't valid, that my reluctance to sign over legal control of my life was evidence of impaired judgment rather than reasonable caution. After my mother left, promising to return, with my father to discuss things more thoroughly, I called the one person I knew I could trust completely. Emma Chen had been my roommate in college and remained my closest friend even after we'd graduated and moved to different cities. She was an accountant in Houston, practical and no-nonsense, and she had always been suspicious of my family's financial dynamics. Emma, I need help, I said as soon as she answered the phone. I'm in the hospital in Austin, and I think my parents have been stealing money from me. There was a brief pause. Then Emma's voice came through clear and determined. I'm getting in my car right now. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. And don't let them pressure you into making any decisions until I get there. I'll be in Austin in 3 hours. Emma Chen arrived at St. David's Medical Center like a force of nature, carrying a laptop bag and wearing the kind of expression that had intimidated professors and employers for years. She took one look at me in the hospital bed, then at the stack of forms my mother had left behind, and her jaw set in a way that meant business. Tell me everything, she said, pulling out a legal pad and a pen. Start from the beginning and don't leave out any details about the insurance or the medical bills. I spent the next hour walking Emma through everything I'd discovered over the past few days. The abandoned hospital stay, the birthday party, the insurance fraud, the mysterious medical reimbursements, the forms my parents wanted me to sign. Emma took notes methodically, asking clarifying questions and making phone calls to verify details. This is worse than I thought, she said finally, closing her laptop after running several financial searches. Jessica, your parents haven't just been stealing insurance money. They've been claiming you as a dependent for tax purposes while simultaneously telling insurance companies you're not covered. That's fraud on multiple levels. She pulled up a document on her laptop screen. I ran a credit check on you, and there are medical debts in your name going back 3 years. Debts that should have been covered by insurance but weren't because the reimbursements were being diverted. Your credit score has been damaged by medical collections that you didn't even know existed. My credit score? I hadn't even thought to check it, but of course it would be affected by unpaid medical bills. Bills that my parents told me were covered by insurance. bills that had generated reimbursement checks that went into their accounts instead of paying the medical providers. "There's more," Emma continued. "I found records of a business account, registered under your name, Martinez Family Medical Services. It's been receiving payments from insurance companies, but you're not listed as a signatory on the account. Someone has been using your identity to set up financial arrangements that you're not authorized to access. A business account in my name that I couldn't access. Insurance payments going to an account I didn't control. My parents had turned my medical care into a profit center for themselves while destroying my credit and leaving me responsible for the unpaid bills. Emma, what do I do?" She looked at me with the same expression she'd worn in college when she was helping me study for finals or navigate difficult professors. Determined, focused, and absolutely certain that we were going to solve this problem together. "First, we document everything. Every conversation, every form, every suspicious transaction. Then we contact the authorities, because this isn't just family drama, Jessica. This is organized financial crime." She pulled out her phone and started making calls. The first was to a lawyer she knew in Austin who specialized in medical malpractice and insurance fraud. The second was to the Texas Department of Insurance to report suspected fraud. The third was to a forensic accountant who could help trace the diverted insurance payments. While Emma was on the phone, arranging meetings and gathering resources, I sat in my hospital bed and felt something shift inside me. For the first time since waking up from my coma, I wasn't just confused or hurt or angry. I was determined. My parents had counted on my loyalty, my family devotion, my reluctance to make waves or cause problems. They had counted on me being the responsible daughter who would quietly shoulder whatever burden they placed on me. But they had miscalculated. They had pushed too far, stolen too much, and hurt me too deeply. And now they were about to discover that the quiet, responsible daughter they had taken advantage of for years was done being quiet. Emma finished her phone calls and turned back to me with a satisfied expression. "We have meetings set up for tomorrow with a lawyer and a forensic accountant. The insurance fraud investigator wants to interview you by the end of the week, and I've documented everything we've discovered so far in a way that will hold up in court if we need it to." She sat down in the chair that had become so symbolic. Over the past few days, the chair my parents had never bothered to occupy during my medical crisis. "Jessica, I need you to understand something. What we're about to do is going to change your relationship with your family forever. Once we start this process, there's no going back to pretending everything is normal." I looked out the window, at the Austin skyline, thinking about the life I'd built for myself, the photography business I'd been growing, the independence I'd worked so hard to achieve. Then I thought about my parents celebrating at Ashley's party while I fought for my life, about the insurance money they'd stolen, about the legal documents they wanted me to sign to make their fraud easier to continue. "Good," I said, because normal was destroying me, and I didn't even realize it until now. That night, after Emma had gone to her hotel and the hospital had settled into its nighttime rhythm, I lay awake thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The years of being the responsible daughter, the reliable one, the one who fixed problems instead of creating them, the way I'd internalized my parents' priorities, always putting Ashley's needs before my own, always accepting their explanations for why things couldn't be different. But lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of a place where life and death decisions were made every day, I realized that I had been dying slowly for years. Not from medical issues, but from the gradual erosion of my sense of self-worth, my right to take up space, my belief that I deserved the same care and consideration they lavished on Ashley. The allergic reaction that nearly killed me had also saved my life by forcing me to see what I'd been too loyal, too hopeful, too loving to recognize before. My family didn't see me as a person deserving of protection and care. They saw me as a resource to be managed, a problem to be contained, a source of income to be exploited. But I wasn't just a resource or a problem or a source of income. I was Jessica Martinez, and I had built a life and a business and a sense of self that existed, independent of their manipulation. I had friends who cared about me, skills that had value, and now I had evidence that could expose their fraud and protect other people from experiencing what I'd been through. Tomorrow, Emma would help me start the process of fighting back. We would meet with lawyers and forensic accountants and insurance investigators. We would build a case that would not only restore my stolen money, but potentially save other families from similar exploitation. But tonight, lying in the hospital bed where I'd spent 5 days alone while my family celebrated, I made a different kind of decision. I decided that I was worth fighting for. I decided that my life, my health, my financial security, and my peace of mind mattered just as much as Ashley's birthday party or my parents' reputation or their financial comfort. I decided that I was done being the responsible daughter who cleaned up everyone else's messes while my own life fell apart. I was done being the reliable one who could be counted on to accept whatever scraps of attention and care were left over after Ashley got what she wanted. I decided that I was going to fight back with everything I had, and I was going to win. The law office of Patricia Sullivan occupied the 15th floor of a downtown Austin high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city I'd called home for the past 5 years. Emma and I sat in the waiting area, surrounded by the kind of expensive furniture and tasteful artwork that signaled serious legal representation. I clutched a manila folder containing everything we'd documented over the past 2 days, evidence of a betrayal so systematic it still felt surreal. Patricia Sullivan emerged from her office precisely at our appointed time, a woman in her mid-40s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd seen every variation of human deception. She shook our hands firmly and led us into a conference room where she'd already spread out copies of documents Emma had faxed ahead. "Miss Martinez," she began, settling into her chair and reviewing the papers before her. "I've practiced family law and medical malpractice for 20 years, and I can tell you that what you've described is both more common and more serious than most people realize. Medical financial abuse often goes undetected for years because victims trust the people who are exploiting them." She picked up a highlighted document from the stack. "Based on the preliminary research your friend conducted, we're looking at multiple felony charges: insurance fraud, identity theft, filing false tax returns, and potentially elder abuse statutes that have been expanded to cover financial exploitation of dependent adults." Elder abuse statutes. The irony wasn't lost on me that laws designed to protect vulnerable older people might be the legal framework that could protect me from my own parents. "The business account registered in your name is particularly concerning," Patricia continued. "Someone used your social security number and personal information to establish a financial entity that has been receiving payments you're not authorized to access. That's identity theft, plain and simple." Emma leaned forward in her chair. "What kind of timeline are we looking at for recovery? Jessica is facing almost $90,000 in medical bills, and her credit has been destroyed by unpaid debts that should have been covered by insurance." Patricia consulted a calendar on her tablet. "The immediate priority is stopping any further financial damage. We'll file for an emergency injunction to freeze any accounts that have been receiving payments in Jessica's name. Then we'll work with the insurance companies to trace exactly where the money went and how much has been stolen over time." She turned back to me with a serious expression. "Jessica, I need you to understand that once we start this process, your parents will likely escalate their efforts to control the narrative. They may try to convince people that you're mentally unstable, that you're making false accusations, that you're an ungrateful daughter who's attacking the family that supported you. Are you prepared for that kind of retaliation?" The question hit harder than I expected. I thought about Ashley's upcoming social media posts, the way my parents would frame this situation to our extended family, the whispered conversations at future gatherings I might not even be invited to attend. But then I thought about lying, alone in that hospital bed while they celebrated, about the insurance money they'd stolen, about the medical bills they expected me to pay while they profited from my suffering. "I'm prepared," I said, "because the alternative is letting them continue to destroy my life while I pretend everything is fine." Patricia smiled for the first time since we'd met. "Good. That's the attitude we need to make this work." The forensic accounting meeting was scheduled for later that afternoon with a woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, whose specialty was tracing financial fraud in family businesses. Emma and I grabbed lunch at a small cafe near the legal district, both of us quiet as we processed everything Patricia had told us. "Are you having second thoughts?" Emma asked as we picked at our salads. I considered the question seriously. Was I having second thoughts about exposing my parents' fraud? About potentially sending them to prison? About destroying whatever remained of our family relationships? "No," I said finally. "But I keep thinking about how long this has been going. On how many times I thanked them for handling my medical expenses. How grateful I was that they were taking care of everything so I could focus on building my career." Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "That gratitude wasn't misplaced, Jess. You were grateful because you believed they were helping you. The fact that they were actually stealing from you doesn't make your feelings wrong. It makes their actions even more despicable." Dr. Sarah Kim's office was located in a converted warehouse in East Austin, filled with computer monitors and financial documents that covered every available surface. She was younger than I'd expected, probably in her early 30s, with an eye intensity that reminded me of Emma when she was solving complex accounting problems. "Financial fraud within families is my specialty," she explained as she pulled up several spreadsheets on her main computer screen. "The patterns are usually similar: trust exploitation, document falsification, and gradual expansion of the theft. As the perpetrators become more confident, they won't be caught." She clicked through several screens showing bank transactions and insurance payment records. "In your case, the fraud appears to have started small. Single insurance reimbursements that were deposited into the wrong account, probably explained away as administrative errors. But over time, it escalated into a systematic operation." The numbers on her screen made my stomach clench. Payment after payment, medical reimbursement after medical reimbursement, all flowing into accounts I couldn't access. The total was approaching $60,000 over a 3-year period. "The business account registered in your name has been the primary recipient of these payments," Dr. Kim continued. "But there are also direct deposits into your parents' personal accounts and several large transfers to what appears to be an investment account." An investment account. They hadn't just stolen my medical insurance money to pay their bills. They had stolen it to invest for their future, to build wealth while my credit score plummeted, and my medical providers wrote off my care as uncollectible debt. "There's something else," Dr. Kim said, pulling up another screen. "I found records of life insurance policies taken out in your name, with your parents listed as beneficiaries. The premiums are being paid from the same business account that's been receiving your medical reimbursements." Life insurance policies. My parents had been stealing money meant to pay for my medical care and using it to buy life insurance that would pay them if I died. The realization hit me like a physical blow, and I had to grip the arms of my chair to steady myself. "How much?" I managed to ask. "2 policies, totaling $500,000. Both purchased within the past 18 months, around the time your medical expenses increased due to the chronic migraines." Emma's voice was tight with controlled anger. "So they were profiting from her illness in 2 ways: stealing the insurance, money meant to pay for her treatment, and taking out life insurance that would pay them if the untreated medical condition killed her." Dr. Kim nodded grimly. "It's a pattern I've seen before in extreme cases of medical financial abuse. The victim becomes more valuable to the perpetrators dead than alive." The drive back to my apartment was quiet. both Emma and I processing the magnitude of what we'd discovered. It was one thing to realize that my parents had been stealing insurance money. It was another thing entirely to understand that they had been systematically planning to profit from my death. My apartment felt different when we walked in. Smaller, somehow, as if the walls had moved closer together while I was in the hospital. Emma helped me settle onto the couch while she made tea, both of us moving carefully around the new reality we'd uncovered. "I keep thinking about the timing," I said as Emma handed me a steaming mug. "The life insurance policies were purchased after my migraines got worse, after I started seeing specialists and accumulating more medical expenses." Emma sat down beside me, her expression thoughtful. "Which means they were watching your health decline and seeing it as a business opportunity. The sicker you got, the more insurance money they could steal, and if you got sick enough to die, they'd collect $500,000. The casual way she stated it made the horror of it somehow more real. My parents hadn't just failed to support me during a medical crisis. They had been actively hoping for my medical crisis, planning for it, financially positioning themselves to benefit from it. My phone buzzed with a text message from my father. "Your mother told me about your conversation at the hospital. We need to sit down as a family and work through this misunderstanding. Can you come to dinner Sunday?" A family dinner. As if everything we'd discovered could be resolved over pot roast and small talk. As if the life insurance policies and stolen medical payments were just a misunderstanding that could be cleared up with good intentions and better communication. "Are you going to respond?" Emma asked, reading the message over my shoulder. I stared at the text for a long moment, thinking about all the family dinners I'd attended over the years. The way Ashley always dominated the conversation with stories about her social media success or her latest romantic drama. The way my parents hung on her every word while I sat quietly, grateful to be included, never demanding too much attention or consideration. "Yes," I said finally, typing a response. "But not the way they're expecting." My reply was brief. "I'll be there, and I'm bringing my lawyer." The response from my father came within minutes. "That seems unnecessary. This is a family matter." I typed back, "Insurance fraud and identity theft aren't family matters. They're federal crimes." My phone immediately started ringing. My father's number flashed on the screen, and I could imagine the panic that had prompted the call. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message he left. "Jessica, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. We've always handled your medical expenses as a family, and if there have been some administrative errors, we can sort that out without involving outsiders. Please call me back so we can discuss this reasonably." Administrative errors. That's how he characterized 3 years of systematic fraud. Reasonable discussion. That's how he wanted to frame negotiations about returning the money they'd stolen and canceling the life insurance policies they'd purchased with my stolen money. Emma was researching something on her laptop, scrolling through legal documents and taking notes. "Patricia was right about the retaliation," she said without looking up. "I'm finding information about how financial abusers typically respond when they're confronted. Gaslighting, victim blaming, and attempts to isolate the victim from support systems." She turned her screen toward me, showing an article about family financial abuse. "Look at this list of common tactics. Claiming the victim is mentally unstable, suggesting that family loyalty should take precedence over legal action, threatening to cut off all contact if the victim pursues justice." I read through the list, recognizing tactics my parents had already started using. The suggestion that my judgment was impaired by medication, the framing of my concerns as unnecessary drama, the implication that involving lawyers was a betrayal of family trust. They're going to escalate, I realized, especially once they understand that I know about the life insurance policies and the investment accounts. Emma nodded. "Which is why we need to be strategic about how we handle the confrontation." Patricia suggested recording any conversations, documenting any threats or attempts at manipulation. That evening, I spent hours going through my photography equipment, setting up a small recording system that could capture audio without being obvious. If my parents were going to try to manipulate or threaten me during our family dinner, I wanted evidence of their behavior. But as I tested the recording equipment and organized the legal documents I planned to bring, I found myself thinking less about the confrontation and more about the business I'd been building. My photography had always been more than just a side income. It was the one thing in my life that belonged entirely to me, the one space where my parents' manipulation couldn't reach. I pulled out my laptop and checked the business account I'd been building over the past 2 years. $47,000, money I'd earned shooting weddings and family portraits, money I'd saved carefully without telling my parents about it, money that represented independence and security I'd built for myself. $47,000, almost enough to pay for my medical bills without relying on insurance or family support. Almost enough to start over completely if this confrontation destroyed what remained of my family relationships. For the first time since waking up in the hospital, I felt something other than anger or fear or confusion. I felt power, not the kind of power that comes from hurting other people, but the kind that comes from realizing you're not as helpless as you thought you were. My parents had been counting on my financial dependence, my emotional attachment to the family, my reluctance to make waves or cause problems. They had been counting on me being the responsible daughter who would accept whatever explanation they offered and continue to let them manage my life and my money. But I wasn't financially dependent. I had built a successful business that they didn't even know about. I wasn't emotionally dependent either, not anymore. The people who claimed to love me had left me alone in a hospital bed while they celebrated my sister's birthday and planned to profit from my death. And I was definitely done with being responsible for everyone else's comfort while my own life was systematically destroyed. Emma looked up from her laptop as I closed mine. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about the fact that I don't actually need them," I said. "The money, the family approval, the insurance coverage. I built a business they don't know about. I have friends who actually care about me. And now I have lawyers who can help me get back what they stole." She smiled. And I'm thinking that Sunday dinner is going to be very different from what they're expecting. The next morning brought a call from Marcus at the hospital. He was off duty, calling from his personal phone, and his voice carried an urgency that immediately put me on alert. "Jessica, I wanted to give you a heads up. Your parents were here yesterday, talking to the billing department about your account. They seemed very interested in getting copies of your medical records and insurance processing information." My blood ran cold. "What kind of information?" "They were asking about payment timelines, reimbursement schedules, anything that might help them understand how much the hospital knows about the insurance irregularities." The billing manager got suspicious and refused to provide most of what they were asking for, but they seemed pretty determined. They were conducting reconnaissance, trying to understand how much evidence existed of their fraud and how much the hospital suspected. It was the behavior of people who knew they'd been caught and were trying to figure out how bad the damage was. "Marcus, did they say anything about me specifically? About my condition or my recovery?" There was a pause. This is the part that worried me. "Your mother asked if you'd been showing any signs of mental instability or medication-related confusion. She wanted to know if the medical team had any concerns about your decision-making capacity." They were laying groundwork to challenge my credibility, to suggest that any accusations I made were the result of medication effects or trauma-related confusion. It was exactly the kind of preemptive attack Patricia had warned me about. "There's one more thing," Marcus continued. "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I overheard part of a conversation your father had with someone on the phone while he was in the lobby. He was talking about accelerating some kind of timeline, about making sure certain things were finalized before the situation got more complicated." Accelerating a timeline. Finalizing things before the situation got complicated. My parents knew that their fraud was about to be exposed. and they were rushing to complete whatever plan they'd been working on. After I hung up with Marcus, I immediately called Patricia Sullivan's office and left an urgent message about the developments. Then I called Dr. Kim and asked her to expedite her investigation of the financial accounts. If my parents were trying to move money or destroy evidence, we needed to act quickly to prevent further damage. Emma spent the morning calling our mutual friends from college, people who had known me for years, and could serve as character witnesses if my parents tried to claim I was mentally unstable. She was building a network of support, a group of people who could testify that I was competent, rational, and fully capable of making sound decisions. But as I sat in my apartment, surrounded by legal documents and evidence of betrayal, I realized that character witnesses and forensic accounting reports weren't the only weapons I had in this fight. I had something my parents had never bothered to notice or understand. A business that proved my competence, independence, and ability to succeed without their management or support. I spent the afternoon updating my photography portfolio, organizing contracts and client testimonials, documenting the growth of my business over the past 2 years. If my parents wanted to claim I was incapable of making sound financial decisions, I could show them a business that had grown from nothing to nearly $50,000 in revenue. If they wanted to suggest I was dependent on their support and guidance, I could prove that I'd been building financial independence while they were stealing from me. If they wanted to frame me as an ungrateful daughter attacking the family that had sacrificed for her, I could demonstrate that their sacrifices had actually been profitable investments in their own future. By the time Emma returned from her errands that evening, I had assembled a comprehensive portfolio of my business success. Client contracts, payment records, testimonial letters, photographs from dozens of successful weddings and events. Evidence that I was not only capable of managing my own affairs, but had been doing so successfully while being systematically exploited by the people who claimed to be helping me. "This is brilliant," Emma said, reviewing the portfolio. "It completely undermines any claim that you're not competent to make your own financial decisions." She paused at a photograph from a wedding I'd shot 6 months earlier, a beautiful outdoor ceremony at a vineyard outside Austin. "I remember this one. You were so excited about the artistic challenges of the lighting." Looking at the photograph, I remembered the satisfaction I'd felt capturing that moment, the pride in overcoming technical difficulties to create something beautiful for my clients. I remembered the joy of building something that belonged entirely to me, the security of knowing I was creating financial independence that no one could take away. That feeling of independence, of competence, of creative and financial success was what my parents had been trying to destroy with their manipulation and theft. They needed me to feel dependent, grateful, and incapable of managing my own life. Because if I realized I could succeed without them, I might also realize I could survive without them. But I had already realized both of those things. And on Sunday, I was going to make sure they realized it too. The weekend passed slowly, each hour bringing me closer to a confrontation that would fundamentally change my relationship with my family forever. Emma stayed in my apartment, helping me prepare mentally and practically for what was coming. We rehearsed possible scenarios, organized evidence, and made sure I understood my legal rights and options. Saturday evening, my phone rang. Ashley's number appeared on the screen, and I almost let it go to voicemail before deciding to answer. "Jess, what the hell is going on?" Ashley's voice was shrill with panic. "Mom and Dad are freaking out, talking about lawyers and accusations and family meetings. They're saying you're trying to destroy the family over some stupid insurance mix-up. Stupid insurance mix-up." Even Ashley, who hadn't been directly involved in the fraud, was already parroting the narrative our parents had created to minimize their crimes. "Ashley, did you know that Mom and Dad have been stealing money from my medical insurance for 3 years?" There was a pause. "That's not stealing, Jess. They've been managing your medical expenses as part of the family finances. That's what parents do. Managing my medical expenses. Family finances." the same language my father had used in his voicemail, the same reframing that turned theft into family support and fraud into administrative assistance. Ashley, they took out life insurance policies in my name and used my stolen insurance money to pay the premiums. They would have collected $500,000 if I had died from my allergic reaction. Another pause, longer this time. That doesn't sound right. You must be misunderstanding something. But I could hear uncertainty in her voice, the first crack in her absolute faith in our parents' narrative. Maybe Ashley wasn't as completely manipulated as I'd thought. Maybe there was still hope that she could understand what had really been happening. Come to dinner tomorrow, I said. Look at the evidence I'm bringing, then decide for yourself what you believe. After I hung up, Emma looked at me with concern. Do you think she'll side with them? I considered the question. Ashley had spent her entire life as the favored daughter, receiving financial support and emotional attention that I'd never experienced. She had every reason to defend the parents who had given her everything she wanted. But Ashley wasn't stupid, and she wasn't cruel. If I could show her clear evidence of the fraud, if I could help her understand the scope of what our parents had done, maybe she would at least stay neutral in the battle that was coming. I don't know, I said honestly, but I have to try. Because if this destroys our family, I want her to understand why it was necessary. Sunday morning dawned clear and cold, typical for December in Austin. I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that projected competence and stability. Professional but not intimidating. Confident but not aggressive. I wanted to look like someone who was fully capable of making rational decisions, not someone who could be dismissed as mentally unstable or emotionally compromised. Emma drove me to my parents' house in Cedar Park, both of us quiet during the 20-minute drive through suburban neighborhoods that looked like advertisements for the American dream. Perfect lawns, perfect houses, perfect families living perfect lives behind perfect facades. The Martinez family house sat on a corner lot, a 2-story colonial with a circular driveway and professionally maintained landscaping. It was the kind of house that suggested success, stability, and family values. It was also the kind of house that could be purchased and maintained by people who had been systematically stealing from their daughter's medical care. I sat in Emma's car for a moment, looking at the house where I'd grown up, thinking about all the family dinners and birthday celebrations and holiday gatherings that had taken place behind that front door, thinking about how many of those moments had been built on lies and manipulation I'd been too trusting to recognize. "Ready?" Emma asked. I picked up my briefcase, filled with evidence that would either restore my family or destroy it completely. "Ready," I said, and we walked toward the house where I'd spent my childhood learning to be grateful for scraps of attention and love. The front door of my childhood home opened before I could ring the bell, revealing my mother in a cream-colored sweater that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payments. Her smile was perfectly calibrated, warm enough to suggest maternal love, but controlled enough to signal that this was a performance, not genuine emotion. "Jessica, sweetheart, you look so much better," she said, reaching out to hug me as if the past week had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "We've been so worried about you. Come in, come in. Your father is in the living room." I stepped into the foyer, followed by Emma, whose presence clearly hadn't been expected. My mother's smile flickered momentarily as she processed this deviation from her script. "I hope you don't mind that I brought my friend Emma," I said calmly. "She's been helping me organize my medical records and insurance information." My mother's eyes sharpened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, dear, though I'm not sure we need to involve friends in family business." But it was too late to uninvite Emma, and my mother was too image-conscious to create a scene in front of a witness. She led us through the house I'd grown up in, past family photos that told the story of a perfect family where one daughter was consistently featured more prominently than the other. My father was waiting in the living room, seated, in his favorite leather recliner with a cup of coffee and the Sunday newspaper spread across his lap. He looked up as we entered, his expression carefully neutral but his body language tense. This was a man who had spent his career as an insurance adjuster, someone who made his living evaluating claims and determining fault. He knew we weren't here for a casual family dinner. "Jessica," he said, rising to give me a brief hug that felt more like a business handshake. "I'm glad you're feeling better. We've been very concerned about you." Ashley emerged from the kitchen carrying a plate of what looked like expensive cheese and crackers, her usual contribution to family gatherings. She'd dressed carefully for this encounter, wearing the kind of outfit that photographed well for social media, but also projected innocence and vulnerability. She was prepared to document this family meeting, probably already planning the Instagram story about family drama and misunderstandings. "Jess!" she exclaimed, setting down the plate, and rushing to hug me with the enthusiasm she usually reserved for announcing new brand partnerships. "I'm so glad you're okay. We were all so scared when we heard about your allergic reaction." All so scared. Scared enough to throw a $15,000 birthday party while I was unconscious in the ICU, but scared nonetheless. We settled into the living room arrangement that had been the backdrop for countless family meetings over the years. My parents on the main couch, Ashley in the decorative chair that photographed well in the background of her social media content, Emma and me on the love seat that faced the family tribunal. My mother had prepared refreshments because maintaining the appearance of normal family hospitality was important even when discussing federal crimes. She poured coffee from the expensive coffee service that had been a wedding gift 27 years ago, the one that only came out for special occasions and important conversations. "Now then," my father began, settling back into his recliner. With the authority of someone accustomed to controlling family discussions, "Your mother told me about the conversation you had at the hospital. I think there may be some confusion about how we've been handling your medical expenses over the years." Confusion. The same word my mother had used. The same deflection that turned systematic fraud into administrative misunderstanding. I opened my briefcase and pulled out the first set of documents, spreading them across the coffee table that had hosted countless family game nights and homework sessions. Bank statements, insurance payment records, business registration documents, evidence of a 3-year operation that had diverted over $60,000 from my medical care into accounts I couldn't access. "There's no confusion," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "There's evidence of systematic insurance fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation." My mother's coffee cup rattled slightly against its saucer as she set it down. "Jessica, those are very serious accusations. I think you may be misunderstanding some administrative details about how family insurance policies work." I pulled out the forensic accounting report Dr. Kim had prepared, pointing to highlighted entries that showed the flow of money from insurance companies to the business account registered in my name. "This account has been receiving payments for my medical care for 3 years. I'm not authorized to access it. I didn't know it existed, and someone used my personal information to establish it without my knowledge or consent." Ashley leaned forward to look at the documents, her social media persona faltering as she processed what she was seeing. "I don't understand. What does this mean exactly?" Emma spoke for the first time since we'd arrived. "It means that when Jessica went to the doctor for her migraines, the insurance company sent reimbursement checks to pay for her care. But instead of those checks going to pay the medical providers, they went into accounts controlled by your parents. Jessica's medical bills went unpaid, her credit was damaged by collections, and your parents profited from her illness." My father's expression hardened. That's an extremely inflammatory way to characterize a family financial arrangement. "We've been managing Jessica's medical expenses as part of our overall family financial planning. If there have been some administrative errors in how payments were processed, we can certainly correct those." But I was ready for this response. I pulled out the next set of documents, the ones that would destroy any pretense that this was about family financial planning or administrative errors. "What about these?" I asked, spreading the life insurance policy documents across the table. 2 policies totaling $500,000, purchased with money stolen from my medical care, that would pay you if I died from the medical conditions I couldn't afford to treat properly. The silence that followed was deafening. Ashley stared at the documents as if they were written in a foreign language. My mother's carefully maintained composure cracked just enough to reveal the calculation beneath it. My father's face flushed red, the color creeping up his neck in a way that signaled either embarrassment or anger. Life insurance is a responsible financial planning tool, he said finally. Many parents purchase life insurance for their adult children to protect against unexpected expenses. With money stolen from the child's medical care, Emma interjected, using fraudulent business accounts established in the child's name, while the child's health deteriorates from lack of proper treatment? Ashley's voice was small when she finally spoke. Mom, Dad, is this true? Have you been taking money that was supposed to pay for Jessica's medical bills? My mother's response was swift and practiced. Ashley, honey, this is very complicated. Adult financial business that's being misrepresented by people who don't understand how family financial planning works. Jessica is upset about her medical bills, and she's looking for someone to blame instead of taking responsibility for her own healthcare decisions. It was masterful manipulation, really. Turn the victim into the perpetrator. Transform systematic theft into responsible financial planning. Make the daughter who had nearly died into the ungrateful child who refused to take responsibility for her own problems. But I had been preparing for this response. I pulled out my laptop and opened a presentation I'd spent hours creating. 1. That told the story of my business success in stark contrast to my parents' narrative of dependency and irresponsibility. Let me show you something, I said, turning the screen so everyone could see. This is my photography business. Revenue growth over the past 2 years, client testimonials, contracts for upcoming events. I currently have $47,000 in a business account that you don't know about, don't control, and can't access. I clicked through screenshots of client payments, 5-star reviews, referral bonuses, testimonials from happy couples whose weddings I'd photographed, evidence of competence, success, and financial independence that completely undermined any claim that I was dependent on my parents' management or incapable of making sound decisions. I built this business while you were stealing from my medical care, I continued. I created financial security while you were destroying my credit. I proved my competence while you were planning to profit from my death. Ashley was staring at the laptop screen with something approaching awe. Jess, I had no idea you were doing so well with your photography. These reviews are incredible. My father's voice had lost its paternal authority and taken on the clipped tone of someone who was no longer pretending to be reasonable. Jessica, this is exactly the kind of secretive behavior that concerns us. Hiding business accounts, refusing to communicate with family about financial decisions, making accusations instead of having adult conversations about complex situations. Secretive behavior, hiding business accounts. He was criticizing me for the same financial privacy that had allowed me to build independence while they were systematically exploiting me. The only reason I had to hide this business was because you've been stealing money from every other aspect of my financial life, I said. If I had told you about this account, you probably would have found a way to steal from it too. My mother stood up abruptly, her composure finally cracking completely. That's enough, Jessica. You're being deliberately hurtful and making accusations that could destroy this family. We have always supported you, always been there for you, and this is how you repay us? With lawyers and accusations and attempts to humiliate us? Always been there for me, except when I was unconscious in the ICU while they celebrated Ashley's birthday. Always supported me. Except by stealing money meant to pay for my medical care and using it to buy life insurance that would pay them if I died. You weren't there for me, I said, standing to face her. When I was fighting for my life in the hospital, you were at... Ashley's birthday party, posting Instagram stories and cutting cake. When I needed medical care, you were stealing the money meant to pay for it. When I was vulnerable and trusting, you were planning to profit from my death. Ashley's phone had been in her hand throughout the conversation, probably ready to document. Family drama for her followers. But now she set it aside and looked directly at our parents with an expression I'd never seen before. "Is it true about the birthday party?" she asked quietly. "Was Jessica really in the hospital while we were celebrating?" My mother's response was immediate and defensive. Jessica was stable. The doctors said she was going to be fine. We couldn't just cancel your entire birthday celebration over a medical situation that was already being handled. But Ashley was looking at the timestamps on the insurance documents, comparing them to the dates of her birthday celebration. She was smart enough to understand what she was seeing, and honest enough to recognize the moral implications. I was posting Instagram stories about my perfect birthday while my sister was unconscious in the ICU, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I thanked our family for always being there for me while Jessica was alone in a hospital bed. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the same clock that had marked time during countless family dinners and birthday celebrations and holiday gatherings that suddenly felt like elaborate performances, designed to hide the truth of our family dynamics. Emma pulled out her phone and placed it on the coffee table. "I'm going to record the rest of this conversation," she announced. "For legal purposes." My father immediately objected. "This is a private family conversation. You have no right to record anything in our home." "Actually," Emma replied calmly, "Texas is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation agrees to the recording, it's completely legal. And Jessica has consented." My mother's voice became shrill. "This is harassment. You're trying to entrap us into saying something that can be taken out of context and used against us." But I was done with their deflections and denials. I pulled out the final piece of evidence, the one that would end any possibility of reconciliation, but would also ensure that they could never again claim ignorance or misunderstanding. "This is a recording from the hospital," I said, playing. The audio file Patricia had obtained through legal channels. "It's your conversation with Dr. Rodriguez when she called to tell you my condition had worsened." My father's voice came through the phone speaker, tinny but unmistakable. "Look, we understand Jessica is sick, but Ashley has been looking forward to this party for months. Half the family is flying in from San Antonio and Houston. We can't just cancel everything. Jessica would understand. She's always been reasonable about these things." The silence that followed was profound. Ashley stared at her hands, tears streaming down her face. My mother sat frozen, her perfectly applied makeup beginning to smudge around her eyes. My father looked like a man who had just realized that his careful planning had been completely undone by evidence he hadn't known existed. "You told the doctor that I would understand," I said quietly. "You told her that I was reasonable about being abandoned during medical emergencies. You told her that Ashley's birthday party was more important than my life." Ashley stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I can't listen to this anymore. Jess, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I had known you were that sick, if I had known they chose my party over visiting you in the hospital, I never would have gone through with it." She turned to face our parents with an expression of betrayal that mirrored my own. "How could you do that? How could you leave her alone when she was dying? How could you use my birthday as an excuse to abandon your other daughter?" My mother's response was swift and desperate. "Ashley, don't let Jessica manipulate you with these emotional appeals. She's trying to turn you against us, trying to destroy our family because she's angry about some medical bills." But Ashley was looking at the evidence spread across the coffee table, the insurance fraud documentation, the life insurance policies, the bank statements showing money diverted from my medical care. She was intelligent enough to understand what she was seeing and ethical enough to be horrified by it. "This isn't about medical bills," she said. This is about stealing money from your daughter's health care and using it to buy life insurance that would pay you if she died. This is about leaving her alone in the hospital while we celebrated my birthday. This is about treating her like she was disposable while treating me like I was precious. My father made one last attempt to control the narrative. Ashley, you're being influenced by Jessica's lawyers and accountants. They're trying to create a case where none exists, trying to criminalize normal family financial arrangements. I had heard enough. I stood up and started gathering the evidence back into my briefcase, my movements deliberate and final. I'm not trying to create a case, I said. The case already exists. The FBI Financial Crimes Division is investigating the insurance fraud. The Texas Department of Insurance has opened a formal inquiry. The life insurance companies are reviewing the policies for signs of fraud, and the hospital has filed a report about suspected medical financial abuse. The color drained from my father's face. You involved federal investigators? I involved the authorities that handle financial crimes, I replied. Because financial crimes is what you committed. For 3 years, you systematically stole money from my medical care, destroyed my credit, and planned to profit from my death. That's not family financial planning. That's organized criminal activity. Emma stood beside me, her presence a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight, that I had people who genuinely cared about my well-being rather than my utility as a source of income. The forensic accounting report has been submitted to the appropriate law enforcement agencies, she added. The evidence is clear, documented, and irrefutable. This isn't a family dispute anymore. This is a federal investigation. Ashley was crying openly now, her social media persona completely abandoned in favor of genuine human emotion. Jess, what can I do? How can I help fix this? I looked at my sister, the golden child who had been given everything I'd been denied, who had been celebrated while I was exploited. But in this moment, she looked like what she actually was, a young woman who had been manipulated by the same people who had manipulated me, just in different ways. You can tell the truth, I said. When investigators ask about family dynamics, when lawyers want to understand how this fraud was possible, when people wonder how parents could steal from one daughter while lavishing gifts on another, you can tell the truth about what you witnessed. She nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. I will. I promise I will. My mother made one final attempt to salvage the situation. Jessica, if you pursue this legal action, it will destroy our family forever. Your father could go to prison. We could lose the house, our business, everything we've worked for. Is that really what you want? To destroy the people who raised you and loved you? The people who raised me and loved me. The people who had left me alone in a hospital bed while they celebrated my sister's birthday. The people who had stolen money from my medical care and used it to buy life insurance that would pay them if I died. The people who had spent 3 years systematically exploiting my trust and loyalty while positioning themselves to profit from my suffering. You destroyed our family when you decided that my life was worth less than Ashley's birthday party, I said. You destroyed it when you stole money from my medical care. You destroyed it when you took out life insurance policies hoping I would die. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just refusing to pretend that what you did was love. I walked toward the front door, Emma beside me, leaving behind the house where I'd learned to be grateful for scraps of attention and love. As we reached the foyer, I turned back one final time to look at the family I was leaving behind. Ashley was still crying, but she was also looking at our parents with an expression of dawning understanding. The golden child was beginning to realize that her privileged position had come at the cost of her sister's well-being, and that the parents who had given her everything had stolen everything from someone else. My mother and father sat in stunned silence, their carefully constructed narrative of responsible family financial planning crumbling around them as they faced the reality of federal investigation and criminal charges. I hope it was worth it, I said quietly. The money you stole, the life insurance policies, the birthday party that was more important than my life. I hope it was worth destroying your family and potentially spending years in federal prison. 6 months later, I was sitting in Patricia Sullivan's office reviewing the final settlement documents that would close the legal chapter of my family's betrayal. The FBI investigation had resulted in multiple felony charges against my parents, including wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. They had pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for full restitution and cooperation with ongoing investigations into similar schemes. The restitution amounted to $87,000, covering not only the money they had stolen, but also the medical bills I had accumulated, the credit repair services I'd needed, and the legal fees associated with the case. It was more money than I'd ever had in my bank account at one time, but it felt less like a windfall and more like receiving payment for years of exploitation. Ashley had testified for the prosecution, providing evidence about family financial dynamics and the prioritization of her needs over mine. Her testimony had been crucial in establishing the pattern of differential treatment that had enabled the fraud to continue undetected. She had also publicly apologized on her social media platforms, using her influencer status to raise awareness about medical financial abuse within families. We had started rebuilding our relationship slowly, carefully, with the help of a family therapist who specialized in abuse recovery. Ashley was learning to understand how her privileged position had been maintained through my exploitation, and I was learning to separate her from our parents' crimes while still holding her accountable for her role in the family dynamics that had enabled those crimes. My photography business had grown exponentially during the months of legal proceedings, partly because the publicity around the case had generated sympathy, and partly because trauma had given me a deeper understanding of human emotion that translated into more powerful artistic work. I was booking weddings a year in advance and had been featured in several Austin lifestyle magazines as a photographer to watch. More importantly, I had discovered a new mission that felt more meaningful than any commercial success. I had started speaking at conferences about medical financial abuse, helping other families recognize the warning signs of exploitation, and providing resources for victims who needed help escaping similar situations. The speaking engagements had led to consulting work with hospitals and insurance companies who wanted to develop better protocols for detecting and preventing medical financial abuse. I was helping to create systems that would protect other vulnerable people from experiencing what I had gone through. Patricia handed me the final check, the last payment in the restitution schedule my parents had agreed to as part of their plea bargain. How does it feel to have this chapter closed? I considered the question as I folded the check and put it in my purse. How did it feel to have received justice for years of exploitation? How did it feel to have my parents' crimes officially recognized and punished? How did it feel to have transformed from victim to advocate to voice for other people experiencing similar abuse? It feels like the beginning, I said, not the end, because the money was just money. The legal victory was just legal victory. The real transformation had happened inside me, in the understanding that I was worth fighting for, that my life and health and financial security mattered just as much as anyone else's, that I didn't have to accept exploitation disguised as family love. That night, I drove to the hill country outside Austin and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and purple. I thought about the woman I had been 6 months ago, lying in a hospital bed and believing that family loyalty meant accepting whatever treatment I received, whatever explanation I was given, whatever scraps of love and attention were left over after everyone else's needs were met. I thought about the woman I was now, someone who had built financial independence, fought for justice, and found her voice not just for herself, but for other people who needed someone to speak for them when they couldn't speak for themselves. The allergic reaction that nearly killed me had also saved my life by forcing me to see what I had been too loyal, too hopeful, too loving to recognize before. My family's betrayal had revealed their true priorities. but it had also revealed my own strength, resilience, and capacity for survival. I pulled out my phone and recorded a video message. The kind of authentic, unfiltered content that Ashley had taught me could reach people in ways that formal presentations couldn't. "My name is Jessica Martinez," I said to the camera, the sunset glowing behind me. 6 months ago, my parents chose my sister's birthday party over my medical emergency, then tried to make me pay $89,000 in medical bills, while they kept the insurance money meant to cover my care. Today, I received the final restitution payment from their criminal conviction for insurance fraud. I paused, thinking about all the people who might be watching this video, people who were experiencing exploitation within their own families, people who were being told that love meant accepting whatever treatment they received. "I'm not sharing this story for revenge or sympathy," I continued. "I'm sharing it because family loyalty shouldn't require you to accept abuse. Love shouldn't cost you your financial security, your health, or your sense of self-worth. And if the people who claim to love you are profiting from your suffering, that's not love. That's exploitation, and you deserve better." I ended the recording and posted it on the social media accounts I'd started to support my advocacy work. Within hours, it had been shared hundreds of times, generating comments from people who recognized their own experiences in my story, people who needed permission to fight back against family members who were exploiting them. That night, my phone buzzed with a text message from Ashley. "Watched your video. I'm proud of you for turning something so terrible into a way to help other people. You're the strongest person I know." I smiled, thinking about how far we'd both come from the family dinner 6 months ago, when everything had exploded into the open. Ashley was learning to understand privilege and exploitation, and I was learning to understand forgiveness and boundary setting. We were building a relationship based on honesty and mutual respect rather than the toxic dynamics our parents had created. But as I settled into sleep that night, I wasn't thinking about my family or the legal case or even the advocacy work that had become my passion. I was thinking about the sunrise I would photograph the next morning, the wedding I was shooting next weekend, the business I was building, and the life I was creating entirely on my own terms. I was thinking about the fact that I had survived not just the allergic reaction that nearly killed me, but also the systematic betrayal that could have destroyed my spirit. I had survived, and I had transformed that survival into strength. That strength into voice, and that voice into a way to help other people survive their own betrayals. My parents had tried to erase me, but instead they had helped me discover who I really was underneath all the people-pleasing and family loyalty and desperate gratitude for scraps of love. They had tried to make me smaller, but instead, they had helped me grow into someone who refused to be small, who demanded the space and respect and care that every person deserves. They had tried to profit from my suffering, but instead I had learned to transform suffering into purpose, trauma into advocacy, and betrayal into the kind of strength that helps other people find their own strength. I had learned that the opposite of family betrayal isn't revenge. It's building a life so authentic, so purposeful, and so aligned with your values that the people who betrayed you become irrelevant to your happiness and success. I had learned that the opposite of being erased isn't fighting to be seen by the people who refuse to see you. It's becoming so visible, so vocal, and so valuable to the people who matter that you never again have to beg for recognition or validation. Most importantly, I had learned that survival isn't just about getting through trauma. It's about transforming trauma into wisdom, wisdom into action, and action into the kind of life that makes all the suffering worthwhile because of how it enables you to prevent other people from suffering in the same way. 2 years after the family dinner that changed everything, I stood on the stage of the Austin Convention Center addressing an audience of 300 healthcare professionals, insurance investigators, and family law attorneys. The conference was titled Hidden in Plain Sight: Detecting Financial Abuse in Medical Settings, and I was the keynote speaker sharing the story that had transformed my life and launched a movement. The audience was silent as I reached the climax of my presentation, The moment when I played the audio recording of my father telling Dr. Rodriguez that Ashley's birthday party was more important than my medical emergency. Even though I had shared this story hundreds of times over the past 2 years, the collective intake of breath from the audience still gave me chills. The recording never failed to demonstrate the casual cruelty that had defined my family's priorities. Financial abuse within families is often invisible because it's wrapped in the language of love and protection, I told the audience. My parents didn't present themselves as criminals stealing from their daughter's medical care. They presented themselves as devoted parents managing complex family finances. The hospitals, insurance companies, and medical providers all assumed that parents would naturally prioritize their child's health and well-being. That assumption made the fraud possible. After my presentation, I was approached by Dr. Maria Santos, the chief administrator of a hospital network in Dallas that had recently implemented new protocols for detecting medical financial abuse. She wanted to discuss expanding my consulting services to train their entire staff on recognizing warning signs and protective interventions. Your story has already prevented at least 12 cases of confirmed abuse in our system, she told me as we sat in the convention center cafe. Members who attended your training last year have identified patterns they would have missed before. Families who were diverting insurance payments, relatives who were making medical decisions based on financial benefit rather than patient care, adult children who were exploiting elderly parents' medical needs. 12 families protected from experiencing what I had gone through. 12 people who would never have to wake up in a hospital bed wondering why their family had abandoned them during a medical crisis. The number should have felt small given the scope of the problem, but it felt enormous when I thought about the individual lives that had been preserved from systematic exploitation. My consulting work had grown beyond anything I had imagined. When I first started speaking about medical financial abuse, hospitals across Texas and surrounding states were contracting with my company to develop training programs, policy recommendations, and intervention protocols. Insurance companies were implementing new verification procedures based on the fraud patterns we had documented in my case. Medical schools were adding coursework about financial abuse recognition to their curricula. The photography business remained my creative outlet and financial foundation, but the advocacy work had become my mission. I had discovered that trauma could be transformed into purpose, that survival could be leveraged into protection for other vulnerable people, that the worst thing that had ever happened to me could become the foundation for preventing similar harm to others. Emma had become my business partner in the consulting company, applying her forensic accounting skills to develop tools that could identify suspicious financial patterns in medical settings. She had also become my closest friend, and the person who understood better than anyone else how profoundly the experience had changed me. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked one evening as we reviewed proposals for expanding our services to healthcare systems in other states. The simplicity of believing your family loved you unconditionally? I considered her question while looking out the window of my new office space in downtown Austin. The view included the hospital where I had spent 5 days alone, the building where Patricia Sullivan had helped me understand my legal options, and the hill country where I had watched the sunset and decided to transform my survival into advocacy. "I miss the innocence," I said finally. "I miss believing that family meant safety and protection. But I don't miss the reality of what my family actually was. I don't miss being systematically exploited while being grateful for the exploitation. I don't miss living a life where my health, my finances, and my well-being were secondary to everyone else's comfort and convenience." Ashley and I had continued rebuilding our relationship through family therapy and honest conversations about the dynamics that had shaped our childhood. She had used her social media platform to raise awareness about financial abuse, sharing resources and survivor stories with her followers. The birthday party that had once symbolized our parents' priorities had been transformed into an annual fundraiser for organizations that supported abuse survivors. "I've been thinking about something," Ashley said during one of our weekly coffee meetings, "about the life insurance policies they took out in your name. Do you think they were hoping you would die, or just positioning themselves to benefit? If you did? It was a question I had grappled with throughout the legal proceedings and therapy sessions. Had my parents actively wished for my death, or had they simply been so emotionally detached from my well-being that they could coldly calculate the financial benefits of my potential demise? The distinction felt important for understanding their psychology, even though the practical impact had been the same. I think they had stopped seeing me as a person, I replied. I was a resource to be managed, a problem to be contained, a source of income to be optimized. Whether I lived or died mattered less to them than whether they could extract maximum financial benefit from either outcome. Ashley winced, but she didn't look away from the harsh reality of what our parents had become. I've been thinking about how many times they told me I was special, how many times they said I was their pride and joy. I used to think that meant they loved me more than they loved you. Now, I think it meant they saw more potential profit in me than in you. Her insight was both painful and liberating. Our parents' differential treatment hadn't been based on genuine love or natural favoritism. It had been a calculated investment strategy, with Ashley positioned as the high-return asset who would generate social media income and trophy daughter benefits, while I was positioned as the low-maintenance resource who could be exploited without generating complaints or resistance. The criminal trial had concluded 18 months earlier, with my parents pleading guilty to federal fraud charges in exchange for reduced sentences and full restitution. My father had been sentenced to 2 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. My mother had received 18 months in prison and 2 years of probation. Both had been ordered to pay restitution totaling $112,000, covering not only the stolen insurance, money, but also punitive damages and legal fees. The restitution payments had allowed me to pay off all medical debts, repair my damaged credit, and invest in expanding both my photography business and my advocacy consulting company. But the money had felt less like compensation and more like validation that the system could work when victims had sufficient evidence and legal support to fight back. More importantly, the criminal convictions had sent a message to other families who might be considering similar schemes. Financial abuse of family members was not a private family matter or a creative interpretation of shared resources. It was a crime with serious legal consequences, and victims who fought back could win. Dr. Rodriguez, the emergency physician who had first recognized that my family's behavior was abnormal, had become an unexpected ally in developing medical protocols for abuse detection. She had testified during the criminal trial about the red flags she had noticed during my hospitalization, and her testimony had been crucial in establishing the timeline of my parents' fraudulent activities. Medical professionals are trained to treat physical symptoms and address immediate health concerns, she explained during a joint presentation we gave at a medical conference. We're not trained to recognize that the family members in the waiting room might be the source of the patient's financial distress, or that the insurance processing issues might be evidence of systematic exploitation rather than administrative errors. Our collaboration had resulted in new training protocols that taught medical staff to recognize signs of financial abuse, document suspicious family dynamics, and connect patients with resources for protection and legal assistance. The protocols were being implemented in hospitals across the region, creating a network of awareness that could identify and interrupt abuse patterns before they escalated to the level I had experienced. The work was emotionally demanding, requiring me to revisit my trauma repeatedly while helping other people navigate their own experiences of family betrayal. But it was also profoundly meaningful in ways that my previous life had never been. I had found purpose in survival, meaning in advocacy, and a sense of mission that made every difficult day worthwhile. Marcus, the ICU nurse who had first documented my family's absence and suspicious behavior, had become a key collaborator in developing hospital-based intervention protocols. His willingness to trust his instincts and gather evidence had been crucial in building the case against my parents, and his insights about family dynamics in medical settings had informed much of our training curriculum. Healthcare workers see family dysfunction all the time, he explained during one of our consulting sessions with a hospital network in San Antonio. But we're taught to remain neutral, to avoid getting involved in family conflicts, to focus on medical care rather than social dynamics. What we're learning is that sometimes family conflicts are actually criminal activities that impact patient care, and our neutrality can enable continued abuse. The training we provided helped medical staff understand the difference between family disagreements and systematic exploitation, equipping them with tools to recognize abuse patterns and connect patients with appropriate resources. The program had been so successful that we were receiving requests from healthcare systems in other states, and Emma was researching the possibility of franchising our training model to create a national network of abuse-aware medical facilities. My photography business had evolved in unexpected directions as well. The emotional depth I had gained through surviving family betrayal had translated into more powerful artistic work, particularly in capturing authentic human connections and genuine emotions. Couples were specifically seeking me out because they had heard that I understood the complexities of family relationships and could document their love stories with unusual insight and sensitivity. One of my recent clients was a couple who had eloped because the bride's family had been financially exploiting her medical expenses related to a chronic illness. Their wedding photos became a celebration not just of their love, but of their escape from toxic family dynamics and their commitment to protecting each other from future exploitation. Jessica understood something about our story that other photographers wouldn't have grasped. The bride wrote in a testimonial that became part of my marketing materials. She captured the joy of finding real love after experiencing fake love, the relief of building a chosen family after escaping a destructive biological family. Her photos tell the story of survival and transformation, not just romance and celebration. The intersection of my photography and advocacy work had created unexpected opportunities for documenting survivor stories and raising awareness about family abuse through visual storytelling. I had started a pro bono project photographing abuse, survivors with their chosen families, creating portraits that celebrated the families people had built after escaping the families that had harmed them. 5 years after my allergic reaction had revealed my family's true priorities, I received an unexpected phone call from my mother. She had been released from federal prison 6 months earlier and was living in a supervised halfway house while completing her probation requirements. The call came on a Tuesday evening while I was editing photos from a weekend wedding, and I almost didn't answer when I saw her number on my phone. Jessica? Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered, stripped of the authority and manipulation that had once defined her communication style. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to tell you that I've been following your advocacy work. I've been reading about the training programs you're developing and the families you're helping. I said nothing, waiting to see where this conversation was heading. My mother had never contacted me directly since the criminal trial, communicating only through lawyers when restitution payments were processed or legal requirements needed to be fulfilled. I want you to know that I understand what we did to you, she continued. Not just the insurance fraud, but the way we treated you, your entire life. The way we made you feel like you had to be grateful for scraps of attention while we gave Ashley everything she wanted. The way we left you alone in that hospital while we celebrated her birthday. Still, I said nothing. An apology might be coming, but I had learned through therapy that apologies from abusers were often manipulation disguised as accountability, attempts to rebuild access and control rather than genuine expressions of remorse and change. I don't expect forgiveness, my mother said, apparently recognizing my silence as skepticism rather than receptiveness. I don't expect you to have a relationship with us or to trust us again. I just wanted you to know that the work you're doing, helping other families avoid what we put you through, it matters. It's important. And I'm proud of the person you've become, even though we don't deserve any credit for who you are. The conversation ended shortly after that, with no requests for reconciliation or promises of changed behavior. Just an acknowledgement that the damage had been real The transformation had been necessary, and the work I was doing had value beyond my personal healing. I didn't return her call or initiate any further contact. Forgiveness might be possible someday, but rebuilding a relationship with people who had systematically exploited me was not a goal I was interested in pursuing. My energy was focused on building the life I wanted rather than repairing the relationships that had damaged me. The advocacy work continued to expand, with speaking engagements at conferences across the country and consulting contracts with major healthcare systems and insurance companies. I had written a book about medical financial abuse that became a resource for healthcare professionals, legal advocates, and survivors seeking to understand and escape similar exploitation. But the most meaningful aspect of my new life was the community I had built with other survivors, advocates, and professionals who were committed to protecting vulnerable people from family-based financial exploitation. We had created a network of support and resources that reached far beyond any individual story or case. Emma often reminded me that my transformation from victim to advocate represented more than personal healing. It represented the possibility that terrible experiences could be converted into protective power for other people, that survival could be leveraged into prevention, that individual trauma could be transformed into collective strength. "You didn't just escape your family's abuse," she told me during a recent business planning meeting. "You built an entire system for helping other people escape similar abuse. You turned your worst experience into other people's best opportunity for protection." As I sat in my office that evening, reviewing proposals for expanding our services to healthcare systems in other states, I thought about the journey from that hospital bed where I had awakened alone and confused to this life where I was surrounded by meaningful work, genuine relationships, and the knowledge that my survival had created safety for other people. The allergic reaction that had nearly killed me had also revealed the family dynamics that were slowly killing my spirit, my financial security, and my sense of self-worth. The medical crisis that had exposed my family's true priorities had also forced me to discover my own strength, resilience, and capacity for transformation. I had learned that survival wasn't just about getting through trauma. It was about converting trauma into wisdom, wisdom into action, and action into protection for other vulnerable people. I had learned that the opposite of being exploited wasn't revenge against the people who had exploited me. It was building a life so purposeful and impactful that their exploitation became irrelevant to my success and happiness. Most importantly, I had learned that family wasn't defined by genetics or legal relationships. Family was defined by the people who showed up during your worst moments, who fought for your well-being when you couldn't fight for yourself, who celebrated your success without trying to profit from it, and who loved you enough to tell you the truth even when the truth was difficult to hear. Emma, Marcus, Patricia, Dr. Rodriguez, Ashley and her transformed understanding, and the entire community of survivors and advocates I had connected with through my work had become my chosen family. They had proven that love wasn't about control, manipulation, or financial exploitation. Love was about protection, support, growth, and the kind of mutual care that made everyone involved stronger and safer. As I turned off the lights in my office and headed home to my apartment, filled with photographs of genuine joy and certificates from organizations I had helped protect vulnerable people, I thought about the woman I had been 5 years earlier. The woman who had been grateful for scraps of attention from people who were systematically exploiting her, who had accepted abandonment and abuse as normal family dynamics, who had never imagined that her life could be different. That woman had nearly died from an allergic reaction while her family celebrated someone else's birthday. But she had also survived that near-death experience to become someone who ensured that other people's families would never have the opportunity to make similar choices. She had transformed survival into advocacy, trauma into protection, and betrayal into the foundation for building a life worth living. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.